zero knowledge on how these reactions work. I just throw a bunch of elements onto Dendro and hope that shit works. Sup, me? Hey, listen, are you tired of these stupid reactions and not knowing how they work? Well, same. So I went ahead and did everything so you guys don't have to. Hey, it's me's. Stop. We haven't even had an intro yet. This is it. This is your last chance. After this, there's no turning back. You take this. You wake up in your bed in the morning and you believe whatever you want to believe. You take this. You stay in Wonderland. And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. Well, first, let's go ahead and identify all of them and how to create them. Burning. That's when you mix Pyro with Dendro. Now, I understand, it's not new, but we're going to cover it anyways. Second, we have Bloom. Now, Bloom is when you mix Dendro and Hydro. And after that comes Hyper Bloom, when you take Bloom, which is Dendro and Hydro, and you add Electro into the mix. Then we have what's called Burgeon. Burgundy. That's when you mix Dendro and Hydro, and then add Pyro onto the Bloom. Kind of like Hyper Bloom, except it's now Pyro. Then we have Quicken. Now Quicken is what happens when you mix Dendro and Electro. And this is probably going to be the only time I mention Quicken, because it's just a stepping stone to other reactions. It doesn't have any elemental properties or damage modifiers on itself besides applying Quicken onto the enemy. Then you have Aggravate. Now Aggravate is what happens when you take Quicken, which is Dendro and Electro, and then you add Electro on top of it. And then finally, we have Spread. Now Spread is what happens when you mix Quicken, so Dendro and Electro, and then you add Dendro back on top of that reaction. Yeah, I know. It's confusing. But let's go into further detail on each of the reactions. What we have here is a nice little spreadsheet that I've made. And this is publicly available in my Discord. Links down in the description if you feel the need to want to check it out. But there's a couple things we want to talk about when we're talking about these reactions. There's two main multipliers and then one minor multiplier with all of them. Now, I will say Aggravate and Spread, they will do a bit different stuff, so I'll talk about them at the end. But the rest of them, they work the same as Superconduct and or Overload and any of those other reactions that are called transformative reactions. Those are reactions that add a flat bonus damage onto what you're doing. These right here are the reaction multipliers for each of these different reactions. I went ahead and just put more than just we have here because I plan on doing all the reactions in here. Basically, your level multiplier is a number that is assigned to you based on your level. Let's say level 80 character is 1077.44. Your EM will be your total EM in here, and that gets put into a calculation and gives you this result. And now you can see for a character that's level 80 that has 51 EM, they're going to be doing 376 each tick burning damage. Now, of course, it's going to be a little bit lower, the actual number that you see, because this all does not take in defenses or resistances. Now those are another separate whole calculation, but essentially the things you have to worry about is your character level and your EM for all of these reactions. Now Aggravate and Spread work a tiny bit different than the rest of them. That's why they have their own calculations. This is different than the other calculations for your EM modifier, but they still work off your EM and they work off your level multiplier. Now, another thing that they work off is attack. So let's say we have 851 attack. Our crit damage, let's say we have 206%. We're going to transfer that into decimal point. And then talent percent, that's how much percent your talent does. If we look, we have 0.555. Now, this may or may not be exactly my Yaimiko stats. I don't know. We could check that. But if you see, we have an Aggravate and a crit aggregate, and a Spread and a crit Spread. The rest of them don't have crit. Now these two reactions can crit. Now they are still additive bonus damages. It's just this number is calculated differently, and crits can factor into there. That's the main big differences between those two reactions based off the other ones. Now I really hope this explanation made sense, because It makes sense to me, but I can understand how it sometimes won't make sense to other people. Okay. Well, that was lengthy and maybe unnecessary. Let's show it in work. Yes, I'm ready. Let's go. Our favorite friend Macaroni's ready for playtesting. All right, so first we're going to do burning. Easy to proc, and you'll notice that pyro stays on there, so I can proc burning again. And I can proc burning again. Well, I have to use Dendro now. So you notice pyro always stays on there, so even after they burn, it resets the pyro's activity on there. And there is an ICD for that. So let's go ahead and proc bloom and see. Let's miss really quick. Let's proc bloom really quick and see how that works. Well, he actually procced hyper bloom himself with his attack. That was crazy. All right, this is the only bad thing about bloom is you have to wait for it to explode. And you see, I did 120 even though he was shielding it. Don't know why that happened. But this will now proc with all of Tighnari's stats. And you notice that it does not put anything else on the enemy. He still has Dendro on him for a little second, so you can proc multiple blooms. But you see, this one does a little bit more damage. Now let's go ahead and do that. So now we have to do that. Proc bloom, and now we have to proc Virgin. And there you go, you see some damage. It is Dendro damage, guys, just FYI. Most of these are going to be Dendro damage. But it still procs off of the character that procs it. And now Hyper Bloom. Boom. And you see that Hyper Bloom is not an explosion. Hyper Bloom basically goes to the character. It auto-targets them. We're going to run out of time. Let's get some more time here. Okay, now that we have some more time, let's try this again. And we have the 2 last reactions left. Now, if you notice, we can do this in any order. We can do Electro, and then Dendro, and then we can proc spread now, because you see that yellow charge on him, and boom, you have Dendro damage 1605. But if you notice, he still has Dendro on him, and now he's glowing yellow, and he should get aggravate. And you notice I didn't proc it with my first attack. That's because there's an ICD on it. And now he's still has Electro on him. So it's almost like these work almost independently. But while he's charged, he will be basically holding on to the element. So you see now we can proc aggravate there. Awesome. And it's like they have their own little counter on him. So they're not necessarily lasting forever. Not like with burning where it keeps reapplying pyro every single time. And we'll do one more time. And you notice in any order we can do that. And quicken does not add damage into there. Aggravate does not add extra damage on like another damage number like overload and all those do. I will give you guys kind of a lowdown on my opinion of the reactions and whether they're good or not. Let's get somewhere safe. Okay, now that we're safe and secure from that stupid macaroni, I'm just going to tell you guys a little bit about my opinion of the reactions and which ones are essentially feasible. Now, burning, it is not a high multiplier. It's in fact very, very, very low compared to the other ones, but it does do dot damage. I don't necessarily think it's something to strive for though, but it's a nice little added bonus if you're using Pyro with Dendro. Now, Bloom, Hyper Bloom, and Virgin. Now, these reactions are very good in a crowd, especially Virgin. However, activating them requires a little bit more thought. You know, you have to make sure that you're doing it with the right character. You want to make sure that you have a bunch of different blooms out. It's a little bit to think about, but it's not necessarily a hard reaction to do. Now, I prefer in crowd control Virgin over Hyper Bloom, and that's because even though Hyper Bloom does auto-target the other characters, it does kind of feel weird to trigger. Like you have to hit that bloom in order for it to do Virgin or for it to do Hyper Bloom. Now, the added bonus with Electro versus Pyro is that if you're proccing Bloom, you have to have a Hydro character. You're also doing Electro charged as well. So that's an added bonus onto there. You're doing multiple reactions in. And I think that's the big thing about Dendro is that it's very free. It's very easy to do a bunch of different reactions. Dendro is kind of like It's a flowing element. I like it, honestly. But it is going to take some time to like actually see if it's super, super viable and stuff like that, you know. I will say it's definitely a buff for Electro, and it doesn't overpower them as like a ×2 multiplier probably would, because they have some insane stats, and a ×2 would not be good for them. Now let's go on to the spread and aggravate. Now obviously I think aggravate is going to be the better of the two, and that is solely because crit damage is a factor in there. Now you are going to build EM heavy builds with a lot of these Sumeru characters, the Dendro characters. That's my general consensus, that a lot of them work very well with EM, but the EM scaling I don't think we'll be able to touch anywhere near the crit damage scaling. And yes, you can build EM and crit damage, but if you take a look at my Kazuha on my account, when we focus EM, our crit rate and crit damage go out the window. We don't really care about that stuff. So that's another thing to take in factor. But I do think that it is a very good buff for Electro, and I think Dendro will come in on its own. I think the only thing we're missing is a lot of constant passive Dendro application that is not tied to a burst. And I think that some of the characters coming out will have that. But anyways, wow, we've reached the end of this video, but trust me, if I can help it, there's always more to come. Thank you for watching the video. Remember, hit the shit out of that like button.